Hey guys, so I have another soul winning tip video for you guys, and this tip that I'm about to give you, it's not just going to help you when it comes to soul winning, but it's also going to help you when it comes to just communication in general, right? And communication is very important. It's very important to help us to make sure our ideas are understood and explained, and so that people have an easy time following what we're trying to say. And a very important thing when you're out soul winning is that you want to make sure that you have the right hand movements when it comes to soul winning, right? In other words, it's good to use your hands out soul winning when you're communicating to them so that they have an easier time following and processing what you're saying. Okay, so just one couple of examples I can give you, just so it's a little bit clear. Let's say, for example, right? Let's say I'm talking about trusting in Jesus versus trusting in yourself, right? And I show them like Ephesians 2:8 and 9. I show them Ephesians 1:13 or what have you. And what I like to do is I like to basically show them those verses, right? And what I'm doing is that I use my hands to signal certain things, referring to trusting in myself as opposed to trusting in Jesus, right? So for example, I like to say like, hey, let's say if let's say if I came up to you and I said, hey man, I'm going to heaven because I'm a good person, I go to church, I repent of my sins, I got baptized. Does that sound like I'm fully trusting in Jesus, or am I still trusting in myself, right? So notice how my hand movements are, right? Am I trusting in Jesus, right? My hands are all the way over here, right? Distinguishing myself from Jesus, obviously. Am I trusting in Jesus, or am I trusting in myself? And notice how my hands are pointing towards myself, like signaling myself, right? And so even though you could just say that, right, but it's going to be much easier, it's going to be much more smoother, easier to follow when you're using your hands to help them understand like what you're trying to say, right? Just so there's less cognitive load in their mind to help them understand what you're trying to say. By just simply using your hands, it's going to help them kind of process that a lot faster in their mind, right? And so you could just say it without you moving your hands at all, but it's not as interesting, it's not as engaging, right? And it's a little bit harder to follow than if you were to just simply use your hands to signal what you're trying to say, yeah, signal the point that you're trying to explain to them, right? And so another common thing as well, and this is something I try to do as well, especially when you're at the door, because typically when you're approaching people at a door, they kind of get a little bit nervous, a little bit scared. So sometimes I like to open my hands up to them, right? Like sometimes I'm sitting at the door, they open it. I say, hey, we're from a Baptist church, right? Hey, like, hey, this is just, my name is Jerry from a Baptist church. We're passing out some tracts or whatever, right? But I like to open my hands up this way because by opening my hands, I'm basically saying like, hey, like, I'm not a threat. Don't worry about me. I'm just a random person. I'm not, I'm not a threat or anything, right? When you open your hands up like this, people are more likely to trust you, or they feel a little bit safer when you're at the door, speaking to them, right? So doing things like pointing at yourself, pointing up in the sky, pointing at something else, or saying like, hey, let's say I do this, blah 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 blah. Like you're listing out certain things, right, as like a list, and then you kind of do this hand movement to kind of illustrate that, right? So just kind of, again, these are just kind of little tidbits about hand movements and communication. It's not like meant to be a fully drawn out video here, but my point is that it's very important that you use your hands when you're explaining the gospel to someone, because it's going to make it more engaging, it's going to make sure you keep their attention, and also it's going to help them process faster what you're trying to say, because you could just say it, but if you're saying it and illustrating it with your hands, it's going to make things a lot easier. It's going to make it much more engaging to listen to what you're trying to say.